everyone, and welcome to Chatty AF, the Anime Feminist podcast. My name's Amelia, I'm the editor-in-chief of Anime Feminist, and I'm joined today by Peter Phobian and Miles Thomas. If you'd like to introduce yourselves.
I'm Peter Phobian. I'm an Associates Features Editor at Crunchyroll and a contributor and editor at Anime Feminist.
My name is Miles Thomas, and I just spent $50 on a pre-order for the German SHIROBAKO Blu-ray just to have it in a fourth language.
I'm so glad that you changed your introduction every single week. I wasn't sure you could do it. I underestimated you. I apologize.
I'm glad I was able to get there. I realized actually walking into this that I had not come up with like something on like ahead of time, so I would have to think about it. And then I'm like, wait, no, I just remembered what I did like last night. Oh my god.
This is up to the minute stuff. We're
Absolutely.
Right on the edge here. Okay, we're here for our final episode of the Shirobako Watchalong, which is why we've asked special guest Miles to join us for all of the Shirobako related credentials he's listed throughout the episodes. If you missed them, go back and listen. And the idea of a watch-along is that we watch 6 episodes at a time in a group where some people have never seen it and have no idea what it's about, and some people have seen it and love it. So Peter and I have never seen Shirobako, or had never seen Shirobako. We've now both seen it all the way through. And we've week to week been talking about what we hope for the next 6 episodes, how the previous 6 episodes lived up to our expectations. So today we're going to be looking a little bit at the last 6 episodes, 19 to 24, but also the series as a whole. And for this one, Miles is going to be answering more of the questions, I think, than in previous weeks. But let's start by looking at the previous 6 episodes, 19 to 24, everything wrapped up. Peter, what did you think of this one? This set of 6?
This set of 6 episodes, I thought it was better. The hiccup with it, I mean, they still showed up, but the teddy bear and the pirate kind of took a back seat again, which I appreciated. I really felt like they started getting into... they kind of made sure everybody had a moment in the last 6 episodes, and then, like, you know, near the end, of course, there's some sort of disaster where they sort of have to come together again.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, every one of the main 5 girls got to contribute to the anime in some way. So I thought it was a really good conclusion to the series. And even some of the characters who I didn't expect would get much time, who felt like some joke characters, had their moments as well. So really good ending.
Yep, I agree. Shizuka got to be a voice actor on the series. I was so pleased. I really wanted her to get something in there. And when it was revealed that it was going to be Catherine's younger sister, that was just perfect.
You feel good about calling that?
Really pleased with that.
That was an amazing scene too.
Oh my goodness. So I basically started crying around then and just didn't stop for most of the last episode. It was surprisingly emotional. And actually for me, what the earlier episode as well, I think it's episode 19, where she goes into this old animation studio and watches Andy's Chucky like on a film reel. That really got to me. I was surprised by how emotional that made me for this, you know, culture I'm not in and this industry I know nothing about. This sense of nostalgia in it really got to me despite that. I was so impressed.
That is my favorite episode.
Showed. Oh, I'm not surprised. It was beautiful. It's just a standout episode.
That was like the president's moment too. He kind of realized she was struggling, so he like showed her some of his old stuff to remind her why she was doing what she was doing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, seeing anybody kind of like, I don't know, get to have a moment where they connect with like one of their original anime, or like, you know, something that really influenced them as a kid, maybe not necessarily anime, and they get really emotional over it. I think that's a really good moment, especially considering what the soul of the series is. So yeah, I really love that episode too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't expect it, but it was... I can't even remember what was happening in the rest of the episode, but that just stood out to me so much. And yes, the impact really surprised me. I really loved this set of 6. I think partly because it really converged. There's a lot of previous episodes where it's opening up, always treading new ground. Whereas in these 6 episodes, it feels like it kind of consolidated and built on everything that came before. And that's always a part of a series that I absolutely love.
Yeah, the wrap up.
Oh, yeah. And I think it did a really good job of a conclusion to such a sprawling series. with such a huge ensemble cast. And I thought they handled it really well.
I know it's kind of jumping ahead a little here, but I wanted to ask, a lot of people said when season 2, the moment the last episode hit, but I want to know kind of, did you both get that feel? Did you get that sensation when you had completed the series that, oh, now what I need is a season 2, or did you feel more satisfied than wanting?
I think when I got to the end of the season, it felt more like this could go on forever. Had it been a Western show, I feel like it would have gone on in various versions for a very long time. And the knowledge that there isn't a second season was always with me. So I'm not sure I got to the end and thought, I really like a second season. That didn't really occur to me. But just the fact that they've set this format up and you think, actually, they could just go through Aoi's life and show her progressing within this industry, and it would be delightful. And by the end of this season, I realized that it had got to a point where I just enjoyed spending time with these characters in their lives. So I felt satisfied with the end of it, I suppose, but I would also be really happy to see more. If that makes sense.
Love it. No, I mean, I think there's a production level that I want to kind of hit on. This was originally planned to be 4 cores, so a full 52 episodes, and every core, Aoi was going to get another promotion.
That would have been amazing.
That was the original plan, and so this news hit in May, or not May, in March 1st or something like that. So 1 month before the ending. And so that kind of put a perspective in a lot of fans' minds of, oh my gosh, how are they going to wrap it up if it was supposed to be double the length? What are they going to do? And then I watched it and I just felt so satisfied with what we had. I mean, of course, I would desperately want another. I would love to see Aoi become a producer, right? But at the same time, I was really happy with this. Clearly.
That explains so much, though. That explains so much. So many of these kind of plot points that they hinted at but never dug into. So presumably her sister Kaori, we would have met her again.
I would hope
in the second half of the series.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
So things like that were just kind of throwaway. I actually think that it adds up to something really special, because the fact is, in your working life, people do walk in and out. Mm-hmm. People do leave. New people join. And the fact that it doesn't give each person even an interior life, let alone a backstory, let alone their own plot line, the fact that these people just kind of drop in and out, that felt so natural by the time I got used to it. So very early on, I expected everybody that we met to be important. This is why I kept saying, what's the deal with Endo and Segawa? I want to know more about them. And by the end of it, it's like, well, it just doesn't matter, because we don't actually see inside either of their thoughts, their emotions, anything like that. We just see them as Aoi's co-workers, really. And that's okay. So I learned to be really comfortable with that style of storytelling, which is very light for some people and then very kind of deep for others.
It really wouldn't surprise me if they were going to make more too. I don't think at any point I thought that Aoi would really be stalled. I think that they were building toward her continual promotion. Because even in the last 6 episodes, there were a lot of moments where she really got noticed. I remember there was one episode where everybody was kind of drinking. Hiraoka and Tarou were having their own thing, but 2 of the it was Iguchi, and I don't know who the other woman was. They were talking about.
They were at the Oden stall, weren't they? Yeah.
Yeah, and earlier on, actually, Erika had talked to Hiraoka about it too. They just talk about people in the industry, and the conversation always goes to Aoi. And she said there are some people, I think she just called them idiots, who never lose their enthusiasm. It's going to be a weird reference, but I remember they talk about that on The West Wing too, which is a show I really like that I know a lot of people hate, where one of the guys they call them true believers, who really believe in the political process. Despite how cynical and awful a lot of the bureaucratic elements of government are, they never lose their sense of inspiration, and a lot of the stuff they said about that character whose name escapes me kind of reminded me of how they talked about Aoi. She's somebody who loves anime so much that you just can't not notice their passion for it, and they kind of stick out in your memory, and that is why she's able to get so much done. It's because she leaves such an impression on people.
That makes perfect sense. And I love Nabepi in the final episode. He refers to her as the ace. And the director kind of pulls her up on stage and says she's the one who's going to shoulder Musani in the future. And there's actually a moment in the previous 6 episodes where I think Nabepi said, "Stop teasing our ace." And it seems like even then she's starting to build up this impression of herself as somebody who's the future of the studio. And that's really clear by episode 24, but they're building that from earlier on. I mean, the fact that they made her the production desk, even that gesture of faith with, they didn't beg Erica to stay around or anything like that. They didn't bring in someone new. They didn't give it to Hiraoka, which they could have done.
Thank God.
So, we'll get to him. Yeah. But the fact that they gave her that position after a year and a half, and the fact that they keep giving her more recognition, I think it really does say that she is the senior woman that I've been wanting to see. Like, that is her in 10 years' time.
Yeah. Actually, I just finished editing episode 2, and I remember you were kind of discussing, so I feel bad because I felt like maybe at least I was kind of dropping the ball on my side of the conversation. You kept bringing up the Mahjong game. And at the time we were talking about always agency and like some of the subplot that was happening at the time. But you had kind of moved on, and I don't think that we'd really kind of moved along with you to the part where she's talking about how they kind of were trying to keep her out of that male space.
Yeah.
But then in one of these last 6 episodes, the same group of guys is talking about her, and they said, let's invite her over.
They call her in. Exactly.
Yeah. So she gets invited to that space that used to be exclusively male.
Exactly. I thought that was such a beautiful moment. And the fact that it was people who had previously interviewed her and turned her down, intimidated her, and got this impression of her as being quite fragile and nervous. And she got invited in as, no, this is our production desk. This is the person who is making this entire production happen. So that was a beautiful full circle moment, I think. Okay, I want to look specifically at the last 6 episodes before we look more at the series as a whole. So there were a few feminist points of interest, I think. The most notable one is that moment where Hiraoka comes across Dee, and he looks at her clothes, and she's got this like stripy dress and polka dot tights, and he tells her that she's not taking her job seriously, that because she's a girl, it must be nice. She can just make googly eyes at a guy and get anything she wants because she's managed to not persuade necessarily, but she's ended up in a position where Maitake, the lead writer, is mentoring her and giving her assignments. And he suggests that that's because she's a girl. She doesn't take her job seriously. So how did you respond to that at the time, do you think?
I remember you and Miles in episode 3 were both talking a lot about how you disliked him, and I didn't really like him. I thought he was pretty like annoying, but I didn't like actually dislike him until I think that scene. That's what really what's the opposite of getting sold on someone?
Put off, repelled.
Yeah. I take issue with that,
did
Peter.
It for me.
I take issue with that because he was like that before. He was that person before, and because he was only explicit about it then, like, he was still, like, brazenly sexist and brazenly looking down on all the other girls before then. So I would hope you would have been pissed off a little earlier.
I guess I had Tarou there, who kind of, like, everybody looks clean next to somebody that gross. But I don't know. I definitely thought, like, he had a shitty attitude, but it felt like he was doing work. But in this 6 episodes, it kind of became very obvious that he was also just a huge fuck up as well. Because we get to the scene where Segawa basically says, "I don't want to work with this guy ever again."
Yeah.
And so he's criticizing the fact that she's that by his perception, what's her name? I forgot her name. Emma.
Oh, Emma.
It was Emma is getting all this help when she's not. She's being recognized, and meanwhile he's doing like the least amount of work he can do without getting it being said that he's not working at all, and he kind of resents the fact that she's getting recognition, and that kind of like put a frame around it, I guess.
At the same time, I really appreciate the fact that they included a character like this who had been completely disillusioned. I thought that was a really nice touch. I had very little empathy for him until they said, well, actually, he had big ambitions. And then he gets drunk and he talks about how he wanted to make the first anime feature film to win at Cannes. Yeah. And that's a really sweet ambition. And the fact that he just lost it, he'd been so badly burned on his previous production that he had lost all interest, but he was presumably just pigeonholed by his CV into this kind of work. And yeah, I've been there. I really feel for him. But at the same time, know what else
to do.
Yeah, and you know, that's such a relatable position to be in. I think once you're working, if you've got a few years somewhere on your CV, then even thinking of yourself in a different position can be really challenging. Like, and making that break in actuality can be really hard. And there probably is still a part of him that thinks, well, I used to love anime, so this is what I do, right? This is just who I am. Mm-hmm. It is really easy for your identity to get caught up in your work.
This is why I love him as a character so much.
Yeah, I can really understand that now. That was hard to see 6 episodes ago, but I really appreciated him now. How do we feel about Hiraoka and Tarou's friendship? They're 2 different types of quite unpleasant aspects of masculinity, and then they joined up and suddenly became a lot more likable, I thought.
I felt like, God, I couldn't imagine them making a way where you kind of feel like Taro's accomplishing something good, but in like some sort of unintentional roundabout way, he kind of keeps Hiraoka, I guess, engaged with the studio.
Yeah.
And I guess Taro's so dumb and has such like balloonish ambitions compared to the amount of effort that he puts into things that he gets really excitable and wants this guy to be part of his plans. And I guess that's, I don't want to say it's a little infectious or something, but it seems like he's actually like making a couple things contribute to Hiraoka kind of turning it around at the end. I'm surprised how much development he got, like in a 6-episode arc, basically.
So good.
But Tarou, I felt like was a pretty integral part of that, which was kind of shocking, actually.
Look at that. Did you ever expect to say that sentence in your life?
No, I didn't. I didn't think Tarou would ever do anything good ever. I thought he'd be a net minus on humanity. No, he's still a net minus.
Yeah, I'm not entirely convinced he's not. But in terms of Hiraoka specifically, I think that it's quite interesting that Hiraoka seemed to have a much higher tolerance for Tarou than he did for Aoi or for Erika even. And I do wonder if that's because Tarou is a guy. I did wonder that. I'm not sure. You know, Erika knows him really well, but he never treated Erika like that. And Tarou is, like, I think Hiraoka is one of the few people who can say to Tarou, your dreams are ridiculous. You can't just become a director. And Tarou, like, will perhaps actually listen to him. We didn't get to that point, but it felt like he was maybe starting down that track where he's got somebody who can bring him down to earth a bit, just like Kinoshita and Honda were at the very, very beginning. So it felt like potentially that is actually a director-producer relationship that could work in 10, 20 years' time when Tarou's got a lot more humility.
Yeah, I feel like I maybe does treat them differently. It seems like no matter what you say to Tarou, it rolls off him. So, yeah. And Tarou would specifically, he's like, oh, you're leaving, I'm coming with you. It's like he couldn't shake the guy. It's like somebody who, no matter how much you're an asshole to, they just don't seem to even recognize that you're trying to mistreat them. So I feel like Tarou's kind of invulnerable to anything Hiraoka could say to him. Whereas with the girls, they like actually, care and take criticism. So it's a different interaction, and they don't want to talk to him because he's a jerk.
At the same time, that maybe suggests why Aoi's handling of him was so good, because she didn't fire him. They mentioned at one point that she could.
Yeah.
And I think it seemed almost like that would be the natural outcome of what he was doing at the time, where he was just pissing off so many people that they didn't want to work with him, and that, that's untenable. So she could legitimately have fired him, and she chose not to. And she chose to say, we're going to make this work. I'll talk to the people involved. I'll make sure it's all smoothed over. And she did that for him. And that's such a contrast to his previous experiences where he was so badly burned. The fact, I think, just people kind of having that staying power with him is perhaps something that he responds very well to. perhaps same with Erika, like they have a civil relationship. Although Erika is a bit of a special character in her own right, I think. What did you think about her in this 6 episodes compared to earlier?
I'm not sure. It seemed to focus on her a bit more, although most of her scenes were just keeping that guy from escaping through increasingly ridiculous methods.
Yeah.
I love it when Shirobako is a cartoon. I'm not going to lie. Those were some of my favorite moments of these 6 episodes.
I'm not usually into that kind of thing, but I have to say I loved the sequence where the director goes into the book publisher building like it's a Western and he's a cowboy. He goes through the entire building to get to the author. I thought that was so funny and well done, and that's the kind of thing that normally I'd be like rolling my eyes at, but they just handled it so beautifully.
Yeah, and the conversation afterward, and then finally funny story guy getting, I guess he actually did get fired.
I think I hated him more than Tarou. I think I hated him more than Hiraoka. I think he was the rock bottom for me.
Yeah. It turns out he's the reason why they almost don't finish the series in the end.
But we knew that, right? The whole way along, every time they said, oh, well, we've heard from Chazawa. Is it Chazawa? We've heard from him that it's fine, so we can go ahead. And I was thinking, no, get in contact with the author. But yeah, it was good to see him get his comeuppance. And Tarou did not get any comeuppance. And I thought I'd be disappointed by that, but I wasn't.
I think you do kind of get the recognition he's never going to get promoted, and he's always going to be on the bottom, though, which is kind of like that. Yeah.
And Aoi gets such good recognition from everybody. That kind of balanced it out in a way.
You really see like how their difference in effort and mentality pays off in the end, and I think that's very validating.
Miles, what did you expect of Tarou's arc when you first saw it? Did you think, because you asked us, do you think he's going to be redeemed? Do you think there's going to be any redemption for him? What did you expect when you first saw it?
I don't think I had as much of an expectation one way or another, actually.
Oh, okay.
This is kind of a situation where I went in and I was happy to be along for the ride, and I didn't question the narrative in any substantial way.
Mm-hmm. Entirely understandable.
My relationship with the series is such that, like, it's not like an escapist narrative. It was just something that I just got really emotionally involved with, and I wanted that to be my first foot forward with the series. So certainly on revisits, I've gone back and taken a more critical eye, or like looked out for things, and I've watched it like I think 4 times in completion, and like I've watched certain episodes like as many as like 10 times. But I never had a watch through where I was, surprised, where I was really trying to figure out what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. I know that's not helpful
that makes
for
sense.
you guys.
I think no. I think that makes perfect sense. I don't think I would have thought about it unless you'd asked me, because it turns into a show almost like a slice of life, only it's not really slice of life. I think it's got too much of a traditional linear plot for that. And
I was way too invested in that linear plot. But it certainly does have all the appeal points of a slice of life story.
Yeah. And we actually had somebody comment on animefeminist.com when we put this up, saying that it was actually kind of stressful for them to watch because they've worked in a production environment before, and it brought back lots of memories. And I can completely understand that. There are some like series or films that I refuse to watch because it's just a bit too office cubicle-y. I kind of remember things and go, no, don't want to deal with that. So yeah, it's almost the opposite of an escapist show, I would say. But at the same time, it's really an enjoyable group of people and an enjoyable situation to spend time in. So especially if you've never worked in an environment like that, which I thankfully haven't, because it looks incredibly stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that's a good question. Would you want to work in anime having watched this series?
No. 100% no. Never. Absolutely not in any capacity. Peter?
It's hard for me to really recognize how much of this is like cartoonish, and how much of it is trying to be realistic. I could definitely say I believe I could work in anime and find the work to be extremely fulfilling. I guess it would really depend on how realistic this is. like at the level of the show, I think the answer would probably be yes. But I don't know if it seems like they try to cartoonify a lot of it a lot of the time. So you're not maybe really getting a sense of like that. And I also know that a lot of people in animation are terribly underpaid. I don't know. I'd probably be somebody on production side rather than creative side since I'm not that talented. But it's kind of like I know animators have a really rough time, and not a bunch of people get very much money and kind of live on like a poverty income. So that aspect would probably, that's like another dimension to why the job is hard. So like if it was strictly a accurate portrayal, I might say no. But yeah, based on Shirobako, I think the answer might actually be yes, yeah.
Yeah, I think the only role in Shirobako that I would see myself in is probably the director. And he's awful. And I just, that's actually very close to how I operate in real life, as Peter can tell you for sure, because this is, why you have to lock me in a cage to get me to do my equivalent of storyboards sometimes. And I completely identified with certain things that he struggled with, and kind of having that sense of vision. Like, I want it to go this way, but I can't necessarily communicate that, and I don't necessarily want to deal with it right now. Yeah, so I'd be the awful, appalling director.
He was better in the second show than the first, though.
He wasn't he?
They specifically mentioned he got stuff done early in some situations.
Are you telling me I should? You telling me I should shut down Anifem and start up a new website? Because I can do that.
No, I mean just I guess maybe Anifem 2, or we'll rebrand and then perfect.
Excellent. I look forward to that. In the meantime, just guys, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
So you'd be on the production side, and I could absolutely see you doing that. I think you do Awie's job really well.
Oh, no.
and for clarification, Awie's job, the average pay is the equivalent of about $19,000 US a year.
Oh my god!
Jeez,
so it's pretty
not worth
now.
it. Not worth it.
The part of Tokyo where a lot of these studios in, that gets you a long way. Like you can live on that. It's not easy. It's not easy.
Yeah.
You make about as much working like as a waitress or a waiter.
Wow.
At like some random place. So like I just it's I would love to see a world where animation staff gets paid more, personally. But I guess that's not what we're here to talk about necessarily.
Pay for your anime, people. That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
I can live
well,
with
and
that.
I mean,
good takeaway.
There's yeah. Well, yeah, that'll wrap. Yeah, that's a good bow for that.
So, looking at the series as a whole, how did your expectations before watching Shirobako compare to your actual experience watching Shirobako? Peter, let's start with you.
I don't think my impressions of the show based on like stuff like Twitter were actually kind of negative, and I maybe it's just the way I interpret people talking about certain things. I remember I was also turned off to Sound Euphonium because a lot of the ways people kind of celebrate the series are very gazy, I guess, or they at least come across that way, where I don't really feel like they're enjoying the series or maybe even the characters so much as just kind of like the cuteness factor or something like that. So they always talk about like, when they like do some goofy face thing or something like that, and it doesn't feel very substantive.
Peter, are you saying that debates on Twitter are not substantive?
Maybe that's what I'm saying, yeah. Well, it's not even debate. It's like whenever somebody's like, "Hey, this is cool," it's never like a narrative moment. It's like somebody eating a sour plum, and I'm like, yeah, that's funny face, much. But the sour plum thing. Okay, but yeah, I ended up liking both this and Sound. So I guess I just thought it was going to be a cute girls doing cute things show, and it turned out to very much not only be that. So.
Not only.
Well, there's definitely cute girls, and they did some cute things, but there was a whole lot of really good plot in there, and I'm really happy I watched it. So.
Yeah, it felt more like they put kind of cute girls doing cute things sprinkling on everything else.
Yeah.
So every now and again, there's a little hint towards that kind of point of appeal, but for the most part, that's not where the substance is, and I'm so pleased for it.
funfetti and a narrative cake.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So for me, I expected more kind of a traditional approach to storytelling, I guess. So I expected more focus on the main 5 school friends. And as it happens, we barely saw like 2 or 3 of them for most of the series. So me and Lee, we got to see a little bit more later, but we, you know, they had their moments and then they sort of drifted off again and then they'd show up again and drift off again. I think by the end of it, I was amazed by how deeply affected I was by Shizuka's storyline. That was perhaps that her scene where she finally gets in the voice acting booth. I think that probably had more emotional impact on me than any other moment of the entire series. And I was not expecting that from what I thought was a relatively kind of flat character earlier on. And she's, you know, she just spends the whole time saying, you know, I'm going to keep trying, I'm going to keep working. And then she goes back to her room and she's kind of depressed, understandably, and going to auditions and trying too hard and kind of messing up and going back to her room and being depressed and then going to work and serving the others drinks. And it, you know, wasn't that interesting. And I kind of wanted her to just end up making a decision one way or the other on voice acting, I guess. And then when she actually got that moment where she's given the sign that, yes, this is the right way for you, you have a path forward, you can actually make it, you're closer to your dream. And it really hit me. That was just so well done.
Yeah, that was probably my most emotional scene too. I think they did it. I suspected from the beginning. I think they did it really well, especially when they when I had her read the second part. I knew she was going to get a part on it. But approaching that scene when Aoi was meeting with those, when she's invited into the male space, which happens to be at her cafe, and she's going to introduce her friend as like an aspiring voice actress, but she specifically like shakes her head and says, "Don't introduce me that way."
Yes.
Like she didn't want to get in with Aoi's help. She wanted to do it on her own merits, and so I knew that scene would end up being a surprise to Aoi somehow. I knew that she wasn't going to be like, "Oh, my friend got hired." It was going to be your friend suddenly shows up and she's working. So I kind of like had that, the way that scene was going to play out in my head. I figured that's how it was going to go, but like that it was like just as impactful. Like, I don't know, just her getting to be there when her friend has her like big break into the industry, and just completely out of nowhere, absolutely by surprise.
That was so beautifully done.
Yeah, and she did it without her friend's help at all, which I thought was really important.
But that's really interesting to me because I didn't interpret that scene in the bar the same as you did. You interpreted that as she wanted to make her own way without Aoi's help. Mm-hmm. I interpreted that as she's not feeling very good about herself right now, and she would be embarrassed to talk about her non-existent career as a voice actor with people who actually work in the industry. Yeah. That was what I took from it. I took that she just did not want to broach the subject because it would be embarrassing for her.
Yeah, I didn't think that was like the whole reason. I figured like it was a couple different reasons, but I think one of it would be like if Aoi had said that and then one of them goes like, "Oh, hey, do you want an audition?" because they respected Aoi and not her. Yeah. I feel like if she got that job, that would probably feel a little shitty, even if that was her big break.
You're probably right. And the fact is that she's known that 4 of her friends are working on this show, and she auditioned for it and she didn't get it. And she hasn't asked them to pull strings at all. She could have said, you know, can you at least have a word and make sure that I get into a crowd scene or something like that. And she didn't say a word. And she just completely backed off from the production. She didn't get the audition.
And that's...
I'm so glad that she did get it in the end, though.
Yeah, I loved when she looked in the booth and saw Aoi crying, and she throws the book up in front of her face.
Yeah,
that was really good.
It was so beautifully done. I would watch that scene again on its own. Yeah, just, you know, whenever I want a good cry, I just go back to that scene. And the other thing that I was surprised by, I think I was expecting us to flesh out the characters more than we did. Now, I touched on this earlier about the fact is that your working life people do drop in and out. And so even though they weren't able to flesh everyone out as completely as they had intended to with 52 episodes, I can only assume, I actually think it was really effective that they didn't. And the result for me was that I got to the end and thought, I want to go back and watch it from the beginning. And now I know these people and I have a better idea of what they do. It will be meaningful to me in an entirely new way.
Yep. God, I'm so excited just hearing you guys. This is great.
Yeah, so I thought at first that everybody that we met in the first episode, we would eventually get a sense of who they were kind of emotionally, you know, how they thought, what they felt, and we did not at all. We still haven't seen inside their heads. We spent a lot of time with Pirate Girl and the bear, seeing inside Aoi's head, and rightly so. And we spend enough time with characters like Emma that we get a really good sense of her kind of emotional sense. But there were many, many people that we spent time with but didn't actually see anything deeper. And that surprised me, but actually I think it makes it a richer series in some ways, that, you know, not everyone does have a major plot line in Aoi's story. For her, it's just, you know, glimpses here and there, and that's fine, that's enough. And to become satisfied with that is, I don't know if I've experienced that in another show, actually, where you just kind of get comfortable with the idea that when people drop in, you may not necessarily get to know them, and they may not necessarily be important to the story. I'm not sure I've encountered that with another series before.
I did feel like it got to the point where I did feel like the jokes with the two stuffed animals were starting to become missed opportunities for other scenes.
Yes.
I don't know if I felt like the story was obligated to give me more information on any one characters, but I felt like if it had decided to take the time to explore the personal life of any of the characters, like who's the animator, the Sigawa and the other guy,
and Endo.
Yeah, like the way it did to Endo, where you kind of got a glimpse into more of his home life. I felt like that would have been constructive for just about any character. So,
but especially the main five, like we really didn't spend a lot of time with Misa. After she changes jobs, we don't really go back to her at all, except for the work that she's doing on this series. And they could have fleshed her out a bit more. We could have seen more of like Lee trying to balance her work at the studio with her life as a student. We could have probably not done more with Shizuka. I think her arc was pretty well handled. But they could have.
She got a lot of personal time, and
yes.
I think that was necessary to show like how uncertain she was, and
exactly.
how awful it feels to not be doing well when you're auditioning, and still know that you basically just have no credits to your name.
Yeah.
And so like, what do you do? With her, it was definitely necessary. With other characters, like since they'd made it, I think they kept the content more in regards to their work.
Miles, you said that when you saw episode 1. It was a pleasant surprise for you, having seen the promotional images. But how did you feel at the end of the series compared to what you expected from episode 1?
Gosh, I mean, so Shirobako was almost like a religious experience for me, right? Like, I became so invested and involved in such a just like deeply emotional way that, I don't know, I kind of bought into all the stuff that I didn't even like about the show. Episode 1 just kind of made me feel like, here it is, this is for me. And I very rarely get that sense when watching media, because so many things are just not for me. I mean, most of my time spent watching media is focused around Japanese animation, and I am, not Japanese. And I'm, exceeding the target audience for a lot of these late night shows, which is like 18 through 24 is like the central audience, though it certainly is broader than that. So I don't know, but I continue to have this incredibly strong affliction of Shirobako-ness.
Affliction. No, that makes sense. Okay, let's look instead then at what we would like them to do if they had got their wish and they had the 52 episodes. If we got a second season of Shirobako, what would we want to see? From a feminist perspective, but also generally as a viewer. Peter, what would you like to see?
I did think that it would be interesting if they had to, because they made like a kind of a cutesy magical girl series, and then Aerial Girls, which was kind of like on the moe action side, which I believe both demographics are pretty strongly male, actually. You can correct me if I'm wrong right now, Miles, but
I won't.
Okay, all right. So I thought it would be interesting if they worked with a female creator on I don't know, some shoujo or a series, something like that. Especially because there's that one scene where Tarou is making fun of Ando because she likes BL.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I thought I felt like that was maybe like in retrospect after you said that they were planning 50 episodes, I was like, was that trying to like build toward their next project? Because I thought the interactions with the male author actually turned out to be pretty interesting. And if you're talking about it felt like somewhat of a stylistic shift, but not a major one between the two first series. So if they have to like, because shoujo and shonen, especially and like moe, can have very different styles. Having to like really change the way that they draw everything, and maybe have some interactions with a female creator instead of a male creator along the same lines as they did for Aerial Girls, I think would have been a pretty interesting way to take the show. And then, of course, in the last season, they'd work on Seven Lucky Gods.
Yeah, I'd love to see a female director for sure. I think we've obviously in the last 6 months or so. Sayo Yamamoto's star has risen quite significantly, and people are now very widely aware of who she is.
And Naoko Yamada is
dealing
the
with
best director in anime right now.
Oh my goodness. She is certainly very popular. She is very popular. And we have these high-profile examples of women directors who are producing quality work, are producing popular work. It would be wonderful to have one of these women dealing with Tarou, dealing with Hiraoka, acting as a mentor perhaps to some of the other women in the office. So it would be really great to see that dynamic. I think I would love to see, I know I just said I got really comfortable with the idea that we don't get them fleshed out at all, but I really would love to know what the deal is with Segawa and Endo. I would love to know what their background is and what their relationship is now and how they view each other's art. Like, we got glimpses, but really digging into that I would think would be great to see.
Yeah, I felt really bad for you, too, when Segawa goes into the office and sits right next to Endo. Because production's so, like, volatile that they need her in office. And I was just like, oh, nothing's going to happen.
I was like, this is your chance, but there's literally minutes left of this. It's not going to work. Yeah, it was I genuinely thought for a minute that we might get something, and we got nothing. And I should have known by now, but I was optimistic anyway. But yeah, I'd love to see that. I'd love them to dig into that. I'd love to see Kaori again, kind of check in with her and see what her life has been like since she got back from Tokyo and how it affected her, if it did affect her. I mean, I assume it would have, but it would be nice to see that in person.
I actually, since we're mentioning Segawa, I do want to mention that I really love the scene with her and Aoi when she's working out the problems with Hiraoka, specifically because of a decision they'd made. First of all, just Segawa saying, like, this guy's a shitheel, I'm not going to work with him. And Aoi deciding to take personal responsibility for anything that happened after that point. So she's basically putting her reputation on the line, right? And this is one of, like, their most important animators. So if she said, I can't trust you guys to properly manage a project anymore, I'm just not going to work with you, that would, like, scuttle the entire studio. But when they come to an agreement, Segawa gets off of her chair and sits on the floor with Aoi, so they're on the same level after that. I thought that was super good writing and, like, you know, just framing a scene after that, because, you know, they kind of like reach an accord, and so she's looking eye to eye rather than down on Aoi at that point, which was good for both characters. That was a really well constructed scene. I just had to mention that at some point.
But she made such a good point as well when she said, you know, our work on screen, that's our business card. That is people recognizing us. And, you know, we in anime fandom, even here, we have Sakagoboru, and we see clips and we identify the animators who worked on clips. And that, you know, there are people who can look at a cut and say, yep, this animator did it. I can't do that. But there are people who are doing that. And yeah, if it's shoddy, people are going to say, oh, not up to their usual standard. And it's such a good point. Nobody's going to say, well, production clearly didn't do their job properly. Mm-hmm. So it was a really great point. And when she said to Aoi, like, no, specifically, how are you going to take responsibility? What can you possibly do that will balance out the risk that I'm going to be connected to shoddy work? And it really forced her to think about it rather than just this vague kind of, well, I'll take responsibility. Well, it probably won't matter even if you do.
Yeah.
But Aoi was
you
able
could say
to
it's
suggest,
my fault. Yeah.
Exactly. But nobody will see that who matters. And especially since animators work for so many different people, it's not like being in a studio unless you're Kyoani. I think they have in-house animators, don't they?
I mean, a lot of studios have
a lot of their
in-house.
stuff is in-house.
Oh,
They do.
okay.
But
Okay.
Kiwani
Kiwani,
especially
I think,
because
is well known for not outsourcing.
yeah, except in rare circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's another interesting point about the studio, though, is Musani only has the one director, it appears, right? Isn't that unusual for a studio? Usually they have several directors, at least of something that size.
Having a director in-house is also pretty weird. It's usually only the studios where the director is one of the founders, or like a business person too. So like Studio Kara, Ano is one of the directors because he's one of the founders of the studio.
Yeah.
I was going to say, when they got to the end of the series and they said next time we're going to have 2 lines, presumably that would mean bringing in a director to handle one of them.
Yeah.
Okay. So that would be them, I guess, growing to the point where they could. Yeah. So I guess that guy was maybe part of the, because he was the director of their last series too. So I guess that he was maybe a founder, and then they get to the size where they're willing to like bring in more directors. But if you have a director on staff who's never leaving, and you're not big enough to really be working on more than one project at a time, what would that director be doing if not directing something?
Yeah,
well,
but potentially the other director they're going to bring in could be our female director. That would be really good to see. If they'd had 2 lines running at the same time, 2 shows running at the same time, and they had Kinoshita on his original and a woman on the other, that would have made for a really great second season.
It's I think a little optimistic even for the series, but that would be
Miles, what would you love to see in another 24 episodes of Shirobako?
So one of the reasons why I was kind of excited for Shirobako prior to it coming out was the head scriptwriter. The series composition was done by Michiko Yokote, who is an excellent writer. She's had a lot of questionable series, but even more incredible ones. So like some things that she's done that I've really liked are like she did a lot of Pat Labor stuff. She did Red Data Girl, Princess Tutu. Princess Tutu especially is very like compelling to me. Genshiken. So she's done a lot of things that I was like a big fan of, and I would have loved to see her in the series. Like she's the one writing Shirobako. I would have loved to see her experiences represented in some way, because you never really see anyone in that role actually at all. You don't see any series writer or screenwriter, and
That's
especially
interesting. That's a really good point.
Especially hers. Like yes, the director. Like I love the interplay between a scriptwriter and the director, and how they kind of go at it, because the director's the one drawing the storyboards usually, and so there's always this really interesting tension. And Michiko Yokote is like one of the most veteran women in anime, who's like at the top of her game, at the top of her like tier. Like if a script is written by her, it usually advertises the fact, right? Which is not something that's done for most production staff. So like I would really love to see like what her personal experience like in the 80s were, working on things like Pat Labor with someone like Mamoru Oshii. Like I would love to see how the 2 of them butted heads. Like so I wish it were a little more.
Yeah, that'd be good too, because Oshii's pretty famous for being a jerk, right?
Oh yeah, Oshii is awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been incredible. Anything else you'd like to see from a second season?
More of the girls.
Yeah.
I in spite of myself, I end up like falling in love with all 5 of them and just wanting them to succeed. And I guess they all, because I came onto it resenting the fact that they were even part of the show.
The other girls?
The main 5 girls. When I started, I resented their inclusion, because I was like, these girls are here just for like fan service. They're in the way of these real, like all these other characters based on real people. What's going on here? And then they ended up being what I loved most about Shirobako.
They're the emotional heart, aren't they? Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah, I'd love to see more of them. I'd like to see how being more successful affects their friendship and their childhood dreams. So at this point, they are actually working together because they're junior enough to work together. The more senior they get, chances are the harder it's going to be for them to make that happen. So it would be really nice to see how that their success kind of has an impact on that.
Yeah, especially at unequal success, because you saw how much that was stressing out Shizuka. So if they keep growing at different rates, if that were to bother any of them, they have to kind of reconcile the fact that they're not all going to continue advancing in their careers at the same rates. Some of them are going to be luckier or better or something like that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how Lee's career develops, because she's in this really odd position where she's a part-timer, so she's ahead of the game in terms of being a student, but once she graduates, she's actually fairly she's low on the ladder, but she's also in an unusual position. So how does she transition from that to being a writer? Like, if she continues to be mentored by Maitake, then maybe that's her way in. Is that necessarily the way in that she wants? She just talked about how she doesn't like the idea of being male or being female getting in the way of doing her job.
Yeah.
But if she's got this mentor who just brings her up with him, that's not necessarily what she wants either.
I think they did do, as part of a greater narrative about having to take risks and put yourself out there, even if you're uncertain as to whether you can handle it. Because they did that where Emma, what does Emma become? She gets a really big assistant supervising editor, is what they make her.
Animator?
I think they said editor.
Okay, I thought it was animator. It doesn't matter.
Maybe. Okay,
it doesn't matter to me anyway. Sorry.
Okay, but
it does matter to you.
Yeah, she. But the crux of that was that she didn't think that she could handle that, and Suge is just kind of like, well, you're never going to be certain that you can handle it. You just have to do it.
Yes.
And because what did he say? I've seen a lot of talented people never get further in their career because they didn't think that they were ever ready for anything.
Yeah.
But then the same thing happens to Ri, or is it me? I always get those mixed up. I should just call her Diesel-san. She has that scene where they're talking about the first idea they had for the end of the series, where she has that conversation or something, and they said, like, well, why don't you just write the dialogue? And she has a moment's hesitation because she doesn't think she's ready for something like that, but she goes, no, I'll do it. And of course they don't end up using it, but that means that they're willing to allow her to write stuff for scenario. So yeah. I figured that's how she was going to continue advancing that way, just kind of taking on more responsibilities when it came to writing out the script, and then maybe actually getting assigned to write out a entire scenario, like Mario Kata, or maybe be director or something like that.
I think it would be interesting to see if her relationship with Maitake kind of follows her through her career a bit, so people just assume that the fact that she's a cute girl actually was her foot in the door, and they make assumptions on her on that basis. Like, I think that would be absolutely plausible and make for a really interesting arc where she has to try and navigate that territory without outwardly offending people herself, but also without letting those assumptions be made about her. I think that would be really interesting to see. Okay, I think we're going to have to wrap this up soon. So, final question is about this watch-along process. This is the first time we've done this. And has anything surprised you about this process of watching the 6 episodes at the time and then discussing? Anything happen that you weren't expecting, or did this go pretty much as you thought it would? Peter?
I guess if anything, it would just be, I think, Miles's expectations coming into this. It seems like we always end up wrap up each episode with him kind of having predicted that we would talk about certain things, and seeing where he thought the watch-along would go as opposed to the directions that we ended up taking it, like how we had different takeaways, I think was pretty interesting. Usually when I do stuff like this, it's like everybody watching it for the first time. So having somebody who might be the single greatest fan of the show ever, sort of predicting which areas we'll delve into deepest, and then kind of critiquing that later, I thought was maybe the most unique thing about what we did.
Good, excellent. I didn't realize that would be unique, but I found it really interesting. Actually, you pointed out a few times, Miles, things that I'd thought about, but they weren't important enough to me at the time to put them in the notes myself, or I hadn't even thought about, and then when you brought them up I was like, oh yeah, we should have talked about that more. So it was something I really appreciated, having that perspective.
Well, y'all still didn't talk about the lean.
Actually about
when Aoi leans on her desk in one point. It's like a single frame.
A fan service moment or something.
It's not even like, it is fan service, but it's like the most benign fan service possibly imaginable. But I just get really offended when they try and sexualize Aoi of all characters.
Oh yeah, there are those body pillows out there, aren't there? And
oh yes,
Dakimakura. Yeah,
But they
I
actually,
saw articles on those before watching. Sorry, say that again?
But those, real quick on the body pillows. They are the most respectful body pillows I've ever seen. And I am so happy that if there are body pillows of Shirobako characters, all of them except for Emma look like they're happy to be there. And you know what? I will take that. That is a small victory, but I will take that.
I maybe have only seen unauthorized versions of the Dakimakura then. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that there's a positive way to view the ones I've seen. But
believe me, I'm stretching to get you this positive way.
Okay. Yeah, they don't look like they're not consenting. Okay, that's the positive side we'll take of it.
The smallest of small victories, but I will take it.
Yeah, not tearing up. We've got a low bar at the moment, people. For the watch-along process, I was surprised that I didn't actually run out of things to say. I was really worried that in 6 episodes there might not be things of feminist interest to talk about. But actually, I was amazed that I think episode 2 of this series, this 4-part series that we've done, episode 2, which was 7 to 12, is that right? 7 to 12. I finished that and I was like, oh no, I've got nothing to say. And then I started thinking about it and ended up kind of joining dots. And I think that episode now is probably going to be my favorite of these 4. Because it was so interesting asking you guys questions and then realizing that you hadn't viewed it in quite the same way I had. And just having that contrast right in front of me was just a fascinating process for me.
Yeah, editing that episode, I just finished editing that. And
oh, yeah.
Yeah, I noticed the same thing. Like, you were even saying specifically what the aspect of it was that you wanted to bring up. And I don't think actually either of us kind of picked up on the thing that you were trying to say. But then listening to it again, where I could kind of like see both sides of the conversation advancing at the same time, I like got it. Like the thing about what was I just talking about, the male space with Aoi not being invited in. You were even saying that, and I thought we were still talking about Aoi's agency. I didn't see the issue until literally yesterday. So, and that was 2 weeks ago that we recorded. So.
Yeah, and I think that is the way it goes. I know there are quite a few times where you and I have talked, Peter, about things that we've watched, and we notice different things entirely. And that's why this has been a really interesting experiment for me. And there have been some weeks where I've had less to say than others. There's been some episodes I've had less to talk about than others. But overall, there's been something to discuss every single time, and it's been really easy to have conversations about this show.
Yeah.
Miles, how about you to finish this off for us?
I'm very pleased with this process. I've had one conversation on a podcast about feminist issues in Shirobako before, but it was mostly framed around the same face. And it was like a 3-hour Shirobako podcast where we spent maybe 10, 20 minutes talking about that one issue. Which is to say that I'm very happy that I was able to really hear both sides, and both of you went back and forth in a lot of ways. And I really liked my role in this as kind of like a third-party observer of the podcast, who was able to jump in with specific elements. And I think that was very healthy for me, because I am definitely coming from the more Shirobako expert side rather than the feminist side, as much as I do subscribe to most feminist theory.
Yeah,
right. So
absolutely. I mean, we invited you here for your Shirobako knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Right.
If I were going to invite someone on for feminist knowledge, it probably wouldn't be a straight white man. I'm sorry.
I would really hope not. And I mean, I think like in the course of this podcast, it exposed a very subtle but important hypocrisy that I had about the show, where I was defending one element of Shirobako for being like true to life, and yet at the same time, in just a slightly different context, saying I wish it wasn't true to life, so that these women could have a little more agency or diversity in their personalities. And so, like, catching myself in those kind of situations, I've not had to challenge the way that I look at the series like I have with the two of you. So I'm really appreciative.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that you joined us on this. It's been almost 4 solid weeks of recording, and it's been really good of you. When I originally invited you, it was just to come in at the very end or the very beginning, and you just said, no, I'm up for every week. That's fine. And I've been so grateful for that as the weeks have gone on. I think had it just been me and Peter and one other from the team, I'm not sure we would have got the same type of conversation as we'd ended up with you. So thank you so much for joining us here every week.
Of course.
Very much appreciated. I'm really happy that you were a part of our very first watch-along.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Miles.
Okay, I think that wraps this 4-part Shirobako watch-along up. Thank you very much to you both. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We have our main site, www.animefeminist.com, where we put up these podcasts and also other blog posts and types. We have a Twitter account where you can find us at Anime Feminist. We have a Facebook, facebook.com/animefem. We have a Tumblr, animefeminist.tumblr.com. And we have a Patreon, which is patreon.com/animefeminist. We are now, as of this week, over $1,000 in income every month. Thank you so much to our kind patrons for signing up to this. We really appreciate it. And your money goes to paying people. Who are not me. So the next funding goal is $1,140. We're actually so close to this now. Well, the fact that we're less than $150 away is amazing to me. We want to be able to pay the editors. So that's people like Peter, like Dee, Vry, Caitlin, Lauren. We want to be able to pay them for the work that they do editing contributor posts. They have been doing this since October 2016. It's been a while and they deserve to be paid. So if you can spare $1 a month, it all adds up. Please go to patreon.com/animefeminist and send us $1 a month to continue our work. Or if you send us $5 or more, you can get access to our private AniFem server on Discord, where we talk about everything from anime to games to Japanese study. So patreon.com/animefeminist. Please send us $1 or more and help us continue our work. Thank you so much to Peter and Miles, and let us know in comments what shows you would like us to do a watch along with next.